Julie Andrews did not simply arrive as a marvel of sound and poise. She emerged as a definition. For more than 7 decades, her presence shaped how elegance was imagined and how resilience was quietly measured. Long before the world crowned her an icon, she was a child navigating shadows, learning early that beauty and endurance often grow from the same soil. From singing during wartime nights to becoming an Oscar-winning figure who would guide generations through Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, her scent felt almost mythic. Yet devotion at that scale never passes through a human life without leaving strain behind. Behind the radiant smile and the voice once believed untouchable, pressure gathered. The very gift that made her unforgettable began to feel fragile, as though it might vanish at any moment. What happens when the sound that lifts millions becomes the one thing you can no longer rely on? Now at 90, Julie Andrews stands not as a relic of memory, but as living evidence that brilliance can survive profound change. Her life is not a tale of perfection preserved, but of grace reshaped and carried forward. Julie Andrews did not begin life wrapped in certainty. Long before the world would know her as a symbol of refinement, she was Julia Elizabeth Wells, a delicate child moving through grief and confusion too heavy for someone so young. Born on March 1st, 1935, in Walton-on-Thames, England, she entered a world already unsettled. For 14 years, she believed the gentle schoolteacher Edward Charles Wells was her father. He gave her steadiness, routine, and the sense that the ground beneath her feet might hold. Then, in 1950, everything shifted. Her mother, Barbara, revealed a truth that split her sense of belonging in two. The man she called father was not the man who had given her life. The revelation did not arrive as simple information. It arrived as rupture. Identity, once assumed, had to be rebuilt with care. Years later, Julie would describe that moment as though the floor had vanished beneath her. From then on, she learned to handle identity delicately, guarding it, understanding how easily it could fracture. That vigilance deepened during World War II, when her parents separated and she went to live with her mother and stepfather, Ted Andrews. A vaudeville performer, he recognized her extraordinary voice and praised it openly. Yet his presence carried instability and fear. They lived in bomb-scarred London, nights split by sirens, days shaped by scarcity. And there were other nights, ones that altered how Julie learned to exist within her own skin. Boundaries were crossed that no child should ever have to recognize. From then on, locking her bedroom door became instinct, not ritual. Decades later, that reflex would return uninvited, a reminder that fear teaches the body to remember. Her childhood was not simply difficult. It was fragmented, shaped by constant vigilance, by learning to read the air before speaking. She later acknowledged that safety was never assumed. It had to be constructed moment by moment. Yet within that fracture, something refused to yield. Her voice clear, exacting, astonishing cut through fear like light through a sealed window. It became refuge. When she sang, the world lost its reach. Sound became distance and shelter. Even as Ted Andrews pushed her toward performance, creating a painful paradox, music carved out a space where fear could not follow. Her rise was not born of applause, but of resistance. She sang because singing was survival. She did not choose her voice. It chose her. In a childhood where silence often meant protection, an instrument of startling purity emerged. Ted Andrews, flawed and complex, first recognized its magnitude. Singing became the only territory where Julie could exist beyond threat. It was not joy that shaped the gift, but necessity. Music arrived before she had language for what she was enduring, offering steadiness when nothing else could. Her training at the Cohn-Rittman School, later Tring Park, demanded rigor that stripped away comfort early. The true transformation came under Madame Lillian Stiles Allen, whose discipline was fierce and whose belief in Julie's wounded brilliance was immediate. Julie would later call her a third mother. Under that guidance, the voice hardened into something formidable. Its range stunned musicians. Its precision felt almost unreal. Practice was relentless, travel unforgiving, but she did not retreat. At 12, she made her professional debut at the London Hippodrome, commanding the room with authority beyond her years. At 13, she stood alone at the London Palladium during the Royal Command performance, singing before King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the youngest soloist ever to do so. These were not tentative beginnings. They were declarations. Behind the astonishment lived a discipline bordering on defiance. Every performance became armor. The world applauded a prodigy. Few saw the child who had once locked her door in fear, now standing upright, reclaiming ground through breath and sound. Each note laid the foundation for a life the world would later celebrate, rarely pausing to consider what it had taken to rise. At 19, Julie Andrews crossed the Atlantic, leaving England for America in 1954 with no safety net beyond her voice and her resolve. On Broadway and The Boyfriend, she shifted the air in the room. Critics leaned forward, audiences responded instantly. Yet she sensed this was only the beginning. The summit came with My Fair Lady. As Eliza Doolittle, she did not perform so much. As Transform, night after night, across thousands of performances, Broadway bowed. Then Hollywood chose Audrey Hepburn for the film adaptation. The decision cut cleanly, lifting the role from Julie's hands. It was a rejection that redrew her future in a single stroke. Familiar disappointment steadied her. Walt. Disney had seen her. He waited. When Julie said yes to Mary Poppins, the world tilted. The film became a phenomenon, earning her the Academy Award for Best Actress. It was not revenge, but alignment. A year later, The Sound of Music arrived, sealing an image that would live beyond time. What cameras never revealed were the bruises, the exhaustion, the cost etched into her body. Julie never complained. She understood surrender was part of real art. Amid triumph, she built stability deliberately, choosing security over excess, anchoring herself with Blake Edwards. Beneath every spotlight lived the child who remembered locked doors. That memory fueled her dot at the height of acclaim. A quiet fracture appeared, a faint hoarseness. During Victoria on Broadway in 1997, doctors found benign vocal nodules. Surgery was described as routine. It was not. The procedure damaged her vocal cords irreparably. She woke to silence that felt internal, a loss not just of sound, but of self. Multiple surgeries followed. Nothing restored what was taken. In private, grief settled where music once lived. In 1998, Blake Edwards acknowledged the truth she feared most. She would never sing again. The loss was physical, intimate. Therapy offered little relief. A malpractice suit followed, settled in 2000, restoring nothing. Julie later said it felt as though her identity had been taken, yet she endured. She turned to words, co-authoring children's books with her daughter Emma Walton Hamilton. She lent her altered voice to narration and animation, proof that presence can remain even when form changes. Advocacy followed. Purpose reshaped itself. Today, Julie Andrews stands with clarity rather than ambition. Her wealth, often estimated around $30 million, was never her measure of success. She valued restraint, safety, and privacy. Homes were sanctuaries, not symbols. Relationships became the center. Her bond with her children, Emma, Amy, and Joanna, remains deeply rooted. She continues to work selectively, honoring truth rather than fighting it. Her life offers a quiet lesson. Endurance matters more than applause. Grace is not the absence of fracture, but the decision to remain whole despite it. Comment 90 or write "Rip Julie Andrews" to honor them. Though the world learned to see Julie Andrews as an emblem of composure, her inner life was shaped as much by love and its erosion as by applause. Long before loss arrived in the form of silence, it lived in the tender spaces where attachment once promised shelter. Her first great love was Tony Walton, a meeting that began without spectacle and stayed because it felt real. She was 13, performing in a Christmas pantomime in London. He sat in the audience with a sketchbook, watching a girl with pigtails and a voice that seemed to still the air. Nothing announced destiny. The moment simply remained. Years unfolded through letters written by hand, late trains, shared ambitions, and the belief that art and affection could grow together. When they married in 1959, it felt like continuation rather than commencement. In 1962, their daughter Emma Catherine arrived, a certainty Julie would later call the clearest of her life. For a time, the world felt balanced. Laughter lived at the table. Creative victories were shared. The fragile idea that something precious could be protected took hold, but momentum has a cost. As Julie's career accelerated, Mary Poppins, The Sound of Music, international tours, the rhythm that once bound them slipped. Fame demanded motion. Tony's work required stillness and detail. Time together thinned until it felt borrowed. Conversations shortened, not from anger, but from exhaustion. They did not fracture through betrayal. They faded through absence. Julie later reflected that they loved one another deeply, yet drifted close enough to see, too far to remain. By 1967, they separated quietly. For Julie, it was not merely the end of a marriage, but the collapse of a future she had trusted completely. The grief that followed did not announce itself. It settled inward. To the public, Julie remained luminous. Beneath the surface, she learned how to be alone with decisions that offered no clean answers. She turned toward therapy and reflection, asking where momentum had overtaken presence. Guilt lingered. Had love been asked to survive a pace it was never meant to endure? There were no absolutions, only understanding earned slowly. Her work softened. She chose presence where absence had once been required, becoming fiercely attentive. To Emma, when she spoke of Tony later, it was with gratitude and restraint. Their bond transformed rather than vanished. Then Blake Edwards entered her life, not as a promise, but as interruption. They met outside a therapist's office at a moment when neither believed in beginnings. Julie carried the residue of divorce. Blake arrived with the weight of a volatile past and a mind shadowed by illness. What passed between them was not romance, but stillness, relief. Standing near him felt like finding a place where the noise stopped. Blake was brilliant, sharp, and inwardly fragile. Julie became something else entirely in private, the steady presence who stayed through long nights, absorbing weight so another life would not collapse. She once said he was her rock, then admitted she was the anchor. Love here was not ease, but duty chosen freely. They remained, building a life stitched with resilience and shared creation. Their films became sanctuaries where work soft pain. Their home breathed with books, debate, laughter, and the safety of being known. In the mid-1970s, they expanded their family, adopting daughters Amy and Joanna from Vietnam. Julie stepped into motherhood with unsparing focus, reshaping her world around her children. Blake, vulnerable yet deeply present, remained the quiet center. Life advanced without mercy. In 2010, after years of failing health, Blake died from complications of pneumonia. There was no spectacle. Julie was there, holding his hand, speaking fragments of shared memory. When it ended, absence did not crash, it hollowed. This silence differed from the one that followed the loss of her voice. That loss took sound. This one took recognition, the comfort of being understood without words. Julie returned to the world as expected, gracious, articulate, but something irreversible had shifted. Smiles softened, laughter arrived with effort. She rarely spoke the word lonely, yet it lingered in her pauses. Grief revealed itself in posture and restraint. Love, she came to believe, was endurance, the choice to remain through illness, and despair, promising presence rather than permanence. Today, Julie Andrews' life reads not as epilogue, but as culmination. Wealth was never her measure. Restraint and foresight shaped her choices. Homes became sanctuaries designed to hold grief and quiet joy. Privacy grew precious, guarded with the care once given to her voice. Physically, she moves with measured grace, protecting what remains. Aging is not something she resists. It is something she inhabits honestly. At the center remain relationships, Emma Walton Hamilton, Amy and Joanna, and the continuation of purpose through storytelling. Her philanthropy supports vocal health, arts education, and literacy, often without acknowledgement. She works selectively, choosing narration and writing that honor truth without forcing what has been damaged. Ambition has given way to clarity. Admiration, she understands, carries responsibility. A life well lived is not measured by applause, but by what it preserves: health, family, dignity, and the right to remain oneself when performance is no longer required. Her journey invites reflection. When the lights dim, what endures is not noise, but the strength to stay gentle and whole. Comment 90 or write Rip Julie Andrews to honor them. As the years lengthened and the public gaze softened, Julie Andrews moved into a phase of life defined less by visibility and more by intention. What the world interpreted as quiet retreat was, in truth, deliberate alignment. Having spent decades under relentless observation, she no longer felt compelled to prove anything through output or acclaim. The urgency that once drove her had been replaced by discernment. Every appearance, every project, every word spoken in public now passed through a single filter. Does this honor what remains? Her days adopted a gentler architecture. Mornings structured around rest and hydration. Afternoons reserved for writing or reading. Evenings protected from unnecessary strain. Her altered voice, once the source of devastation, became something to safeguard rather than mourn. She learned its new boundaries intimately, understanding when silence was care rather than loss. This was not resignation. It was stewardship. Julie Andrews did not grieve loudly. She never converted loss into spectacle. Instead, she allowed it to refine her. The discipline that once forged her voice now shaped her presence. When she spoke, people leaned in not because of volume or power, but because of clarity. What she said carried weight precisely because she no longer said everything. Her creative life continued, but on her own terms. Children's literature became a natural extension of her inner world. Co-authoring books with her daughter, Emma Walton Hamilton, was not merely a professional collaboration, but an emotional restoration. Together, they shaped stories rooted in kindness, courage, and quiet perseverance. These were not escapist fantasies. They were emotional maps, gently guiding young readers through uncertainty with reassurance rather than faults. Certainty. Julie often described writing as music translated into language. Where her voice once carried melody, her words now carried rhythm. Sentences rose and fell with the same care once given to breath and pitch. In these books, echoes of her own journey lived quietly, characters navigating change, discovering strength and gentleness, learning that identity can adapt without disappearing. Narration and voice work followed a similar philosophy. She accepted only projects that respected her limitations, lending her presence to animation and documentaries where warmth mattered more than range. Her voice, though changed, retained its unmistakable clarity. It no longer soared, but it anchored. It comforted. It reminded audiences that transformation does not negate essence. Public appearances became rare, but when Julie Andrews stepped into view, the response remained reverent. She did not command attention, she received it. Audiences rose not out of habit, but gratitude. There was an unspoken understanding that what they were witnessing was not performance, but survival shaped into grace. Interviews, when granted, revealed a woman unafraid of reflection. She spoke candidly about loss, about the disorientation that followed her vocal injury, about the long recalibration of self that ensued. She never framed herself as a victim, nor did she romanticize endurance. She spoke plainly, acknowledging pain without allowing it to define her dot when asked about identity. She once reflected that her voice had been a companion, not her entirety. Losing it forced her to confront who she was without her most celebrated attribute. The answer, she admitted, did not arrive quickly. It emerged gradually through relationships, purpose, and time. In that process, she discovered something unexpected: freedom. Freedom from expectation, freedom from repetition, freedom to evolve without apology. Family remained her axis. Her relationship with Emma deepened into friendship and partnership. With Amy and Joanna, she nurtured stability and presence, offering the kind of attentiveness she herself had once needed. Motherhood for Julie Andrews was not an accessory to achievement. It was its own form of artistry, requiring patience, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Those close to her describe her as attentive, observant, and deeply empathetic. She listens more than she speaks. She remembers details others forget. She offers counsel without instruction. There is no performance in her kindness. It is practiced quietly, consistently, without witnesses. Her philanthropy follows the same pattern. Support for vocal health research, arts education, and literacy initiatives is given discreetly. She understands, perhaps better than most, the fragility of creative instruments, whether voices, bodies, or spirits. Her advocacy is rooted not in anger, but prevention. If her experience can spare someone else the same shock, then meaning has been salvaged from loss. Physically, Julie Andrews carries herself with a dignity that feels earned rather than preserved. Age has not dimmed her presence, it has clarified it. She does not attempt to recreate youth. She inhabits her years fully, accepting limitations without surrendering curiosity. Her style reflects this truth: simple, elegant, unforced. Nothing is worn to distract. Everything is chosen to serve comfort and authenticity. She has spoken openly about aging as a process of listening to the body, to fatigue, to instinct. Resistance, she believes, creates more suffering than time itself. Acceptance, by contrast, allows grace to settle. This philosophy extends beyond appearance into every corner of her life. She no longer fights change. She works with it. In this stage, success is no longer measured by output or recognition, but by coherence. Does her life make sense to her? Does it align with her values? Does it leave space for peace? These questions guide her far more than external metrics ever could. Julie Andrews' legacy is often summarized in roles, awards, and cultural impact. Yet those who look more closely see something far rarer: a life shaped by fracture that never hardened into bitterness, a career built on discipline that never calcified into rigidity, a woman who endured loss without allowing it to eclipse compassion. She did not escape pain. She integrated it. She did not outgrow grief. She learned how to carry it without letting it spill into cruelty or self-erasure. In doing so, she offers a different model of strength, one rooted not in conquest, but in continuity. Her story reminds us that grace is not static. It is not something bestowed and preserved. It is something practiced, adjusted, and renewed in response to life's demands. And perhaps that is why her presence continues to resonate. not because she remained unchanged, but because she allowed herself to change without disappearing. At 90, Julie Andrews stands not as an icon frozen in time, but as a living testament to adaptation, to the quiet courage of staying present, to the possibility that even when the sound fades, meaning does not. Comment 90 or write Rip Julie Andrews to honor them. Asterisk as time continued its steady passage. Julie Andrews became increasingly aware that legacy is not something declared, but something revealed in retrospect. It appears not in headlines, but in the lives quietly shaped by example. She watched as generations who had grown up with her films returned as adults, carrying melodies and memories they had never realized were anchors. Parents introduced their children to her work not out of nostalgia, but trust. Trust that what she represented was safe, grounding, and sincere. This recognition never inflated her sense of self. If anything, it deepened her humility. Julie often spoke of gratitude not as a feeling, but as a discipline. She practiced it deliberately, especially on days when energy waned or reflection brought difficult memories to the surface. Gratitude for her was not denial of pain. It was acknowledgement that pain had not consumed everything. Her relationship with the past grew gentler. Where earlier years had been marked by vigilance and self-protection, later years allowed for reconciliation, not an absolution, not forgetting, but understanding without self-blame. She came to see her younger self not as fragile, but as formidable, a child who endured, a young woman who persisted, an artist who adapted. Public honors continued to arrive, lifetime achievements, standing ovations, tributes spoken with reverence. Julie accepted them with grace, yet remained slightly apart from the ceremony surrounding them. She understood that applause is a moment, not a companion. It arrives, swells, and fades. What remains afterward is who you are when the room empties. In private, her days were marked by rituals that grounded her. Tea taken slowly. Books read not for productivity but pleasure. Letters answered by hand when possible. She remained deeply attentive to language, believing that words, like music, carry responsibility. Careless phrasing could wound. Thoughtful expression could heal. She also became increasingly reflective about fame itself. In conversations, she described it as a current rather than a destination, something that carries you forward whether you are ready or not. Surviving it, she believed, required anchoring oneself to values that existed before recognition arrived. Without that anchor, admiration could easily erode identity rather than affirm it. Julie Andrews' sense of purpose no longer depended on visibility, yet her influence quietly expanded. Artists cited her not only as inspiration, but as reassurance that discipline and kindness need not be mutually exclusive, that excellence does not require cruelty, that longevity is built as much on restraint as ambition. She became an unspoken counterpoint to a culture obsessed with reinvention at any cost. Her life suggested that continuity has value, that remaining oneself, even as circumstances change, is a radical act. She did not abandon her principles to stay relevant. She allowed relevance to find her where she stood. Health, carefully managed, remained a priority. She listened closely to her body, honoring its limits without resentment. The injuries and surgeries of earlier years had taught her that endurance is not infinite. Care was not indulgence. It was preservation. This awareness extended emotionally as well. She chose her engagements carefully, declining more often than accepting, not from disinterest but discernment. Her connection to audiences evolved into something quieter but deeper. Letters arrived from people who had never met her yet felt known by her work. Stories of hospital rooms soothed by familiar songs. A childhood fear softened by Mary Poppins. of resilience modeled by a woman who did not disappear when her greatest gift was altered. Julie read these letters slowly. She did not respond to all of them, but she held them with seriousness. They confirmed what she had come to believe, that art's true impact often occurs far from stages and screens. In moments no one documents. This understanding reframed her sense of achievement. Awards recognized craft. Influence revealed consequence. She valued the latter more deeply. If her presence had offered steadiness to others navigating uncertainty, then something meaningful had been accomplished. As she entered her 10th decade, conversations about mortality naturally surfaced. Julie approached them without drama. Death, to her, was not an adversary, but a certainty deserving respect. What mattered was not avoiding it, but arriving without regret. She spoke of wanting her life to feel complete rather than prolonged. Completion, she believed, came from alignment between values and action, intention and behavior. By that measure, she felt at peace. There were no roles left unfinished, no apologies unspoken, no identities unresolved. She had lived many lives within one and honored each transition as honestly as she could. Those closest to her describe this period as one of quiet contentment, not constant happiness, but steadiness. A sense that she had made peace with what was lost and gratitude for what remained. The balance was delicate, but real. Julie Andrews' story does not conclude with triumph or tragedy. It continues in the softer register where meaning resides, in the example of adapting without surrendering dignity, of aging without erasing self, of loving deeply, losing profoundly, and continuing anyway. Her presence today is not loud, but it is luminous, not commanding, but reassuring. She stands as a reminder that strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply stays. Comment 90 or write Rip Julie Andrews to honor them. Asterisk, in the quiet continuum of her later years, Julie Andrews came to understand that remembrance is shaped not by spectacle, but by resonance. The stories that endure are not always the loudest ones, but those that return uninvited in moments of stillness. A melody hummed absent-mindedly, a line of dialogue recalled without effort, a feeling of reassurance that arrives without explanation. This is where her presence continues to live. She never sought to control how she would be remembered. That impulse, she believed, belonged to fear rather than faith. Instead, she trusted that the truth of her life, its fractures, its discipline, its transformations would speak more clearly than any curated image. What mattered most was that she had remained honest with herself, even when that honesty required letting go of what the world loved most about her. There is a particular courage in allowing a public identity to evolve without resistance. Julie Andrews practiced that courage daily. She did not cling to former versions of herself, nor did she dismiss them. Each phase was acknowledged as necessary, each loss integrated rather than denied. In doing so, she modeled a way of living that does not confuse constancy with stagnation. Those who encounter her now often remark on the stillness that surrounds her. Not emptiness, but presence. The kind that listens fully and speaks with intention. She asks thoughtful questions. She pauses before answering. Silence, once imposed by fear and later by injury, has become something she wields with agency. It no longer signals absence. It signals care. Her conversations drift easily toward meaning rather than memory. She is less interested in recounting accomplishments than in reflecting on what they taught her. Fame, she notes, is neither enemy nor ally. It is simply a condition, one that amplifies whatever already exists within a person. For her, it amplified discipline, vulnerability, and the necessity of boundaries. Boundaries, she learned, are not walls. They are structures that allow life to continue without collapse. She built them gradually around her voice, her time, her emotional energy. Each boundary was an act of self-respect, a refusal to be consumed by expectation. In a world that often rewards overextension, her restraint became its own quiet defiance. Julie Andrews' influence on the arts extends beyond performance. She altered the emotional vocabulary available to audiences. She demonstrated that gentleness can coexist with authority, that warmth need not undermine rigor. Her characters were not powerful because they dominated, but because they studied. They offered reassurance without condescension, guidance without force. This quality was not an accident of casting. It reflected who she was becoming off screen. The same attentiveness that shaped her role shaped her relationships. She believed deeply in showing up not with answers, but with availability. Presence, she learned, is often more valuable than intervention. Her life also stands as a testament to recovery that does not restore what was lost, but builds something new alongside absence. After her vocal injury, she did not wait for healing to resume living. She lived through the injury, around it, with it. She allowed grief its place, but did not grant it dominion. In moments of reflection, Julie has spoken about gratitude not as a conclusion, but as a practice. Gratitude for the voice she once had. Gratitude for the silence that followed and taught her patience. Gratitude for love that arrived imperfectly but fully. Gratitude for work that connected her to others in ways she never anticipated. She understands now that life does not need to be free of sorrow to be meaningful. It needs only to remain open, open to change, open to connection, open to the possibility that what ends may also make room. As she moves through her days, there is no sense of unfinished business, only attentiveness. She continues to write, to advise, to encourage quietly. Her contributions are no longer measured by output, but by alignment. She lives in a way that feels congruent with what she has learned. Julie Andrews' journey offers a rare perspective on endurance. Not the endurance that grits its teeth and pushes forward at any cost, but the endurance that adapts intelligently, that rests when needed, that releases what can no longer be carried. This form of strength does not seek admiration. It seeks balance. Her story reminds us that identity is not fixed by a single talent, no matter how luminous. It is shaped by choices made in response to loss, by values upheld when recognition fades, by the willingness to remain present even when the familiar disappears. In this sense, her life is less a performance than a composition, one that modulates, softens, and resolves without needing to return to its opening theme. The melody changes, but the intention remains. At 90, Julie Andrews stands as a figure not defined by nostalgia, but by continuity. She is not frozen in her most celebrated moments, nor diminished by what followed them. She exists fully in the present, carrying her history without being bound by it. What she offers now is not spectacle, but example. A demonstration that grace is not something one preserves, but something one practices. That dignity is not granted by applause, but sustained through honesty. That even when the world stops listening for sound, meaning can still be heard. Life leaves us with a final quiet invitation to consider what we protect, what we release, and how we choose to remain ourselves as everything else changes. Comment 90 or write RIP Julie Andrews to honor them.